Hey everyone, this is Karenology. Today's story is so unbelievable. You'll think it's straight out of a movie. Let's get into it. They always say a man knows when he's being watched. I used to laugh at that when I was younger. Thought it was just nerves or too much coffee. But when you're 61, half lame from a fall in the Rockies, and have a dog that's smarter than most people you meet, you learn to trust the tingling at the back of your neck. That morning, standing at the edge of the old hunting trail behind our land, I felt it clear as day. Someone had been here. My name's Harold Bishop. Used to be a cartographer back when maps still mattered. Now I live with my wife, Miriam, out past the ridge near the dead sycamore, on land my daddy left me. There's a dirt path running behind our home. Thin, winding, quiet. That trail was carved by my grandfather's hands and guarded by our boots for 3 generations. It wasn't just a path. It was memory, muscle, and marrow. Lately, though, something's been off. I noticed tire tracks where there shouldn't be any. Not the usual ATVs from teens sneaking a joyride. These were deep, wide, heavy, SUV type, and fresh. The kind of tracks that made my stomach tighten. Not just because of the intrusion, but because of what they meant. Someone who didn't ask. Someone who thought they could. "Toby!" I called. My old hound came trotting up, ears perked. I scratched him behind the ears. Let's see what kind of visitor we had. We walked the trail for half a mile until we found the trash. A crushed energy drink can. Metallic blue. City stuff. Not from around here. There were footprints, too. Nice boots, polished soles. Not farmer wear. I took a photo with my phone. Something my daughter insisted I keep on me at all times. "Dad," she'd say, "you need to keep records." People don't believe stories anymore. They believe data. Later that day, a man pulled up to our gate. Black SUV. Sunglasses, trimmed beard. Looked like he smelled like cologne and city money. He didn't introduce himself with a handshake. Just waved a badge under my nose. "Justin North. I'm here on behalf of the Homeowner Association for Willow Creek Estates," he said, motioning to the hills beyond the trees. "We're doing inspections on adjoining land use. Need to verify boundaries." I crossed my arms. This ain't adjoining. This is mine. Been mine since 1958. Yes, well, he said, clearly not listening. "There's been some confusion about easements and natural drainage. Might need to do a full survey." Not without my permission. He smiled like I'd told a joke. "It's not really optional, sir. You should have received a letter." I hadn't. But Miriam had a theory about that. She said the mail's been tampered with. I thought she was being paranoid. Now I wasn't so sure. He left with a nod, but his eyes said he didn't take no as final. That night I found Miriam in the kitchen with old maps spread out on the table. Her hair was up in a bun, glasses perched on her nose. They want to play cartographer? Let's show them what real mapping looks like. I couldn't help but smile. We stayed up late comparing aerials, deed lines, and property surveys. Every corner of our land was etched into my memory, but seeing it all on paper felt like building a shield. 2 nights later, Toby growled at the window. Lights moved beyond the trees. SUV headlights. They didn't stop at the fence this time. They rolled right up the trail, the one my grandfather walked with a hand-carved cane, the one my father taught me to follow by starlight. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I knew one thing for sure. If they wanted a fight over dirt, they'd chosen the wrong old man to mess with, and I hadn't even shown them the spikes yet. By the time the sun broke over the ridge the next morning, I'd already been out by the trail with a thermos of black coffee and a pair of binoculars that had once belonged to my father. I sat on an old folding chair, one leg shorter than the rest, and stared down the tree line like I was back in the service. Toby lay at my feet, ears twitching, nose in the air. He knew something was off, same as I did. I didn't like feeling watched on my own land. And I sure didn't like the idea of some stranger thinking he could bully an old man off his rightful property. See, the thing about men like Justin North? They don't just knock on your door. They come looking for weakness. They count on you being too tired, too broke, or too polite to stand up and say, "Not here." Miriam made toast and eggs, then came out to hand me a file folder. "Old aerials," she said, "and our deed copy. Found them behind the wedding china." I opened it, and sure enough, there it was. Our boundaries, clear as day, including the hunting trail. The original survey had my father's signature on it, in ink faded but firm. Later that morning, I called my daughter, Lauren. She's a property attorney down in Boise, the kind that talks fast and plays slow. She answered on the third ring. "Dad, you okay?" "Depends how much you like lawsuits." I told her everything. The SUV, the badge, the talk about easements and inspections. She listened without interrupting, then said, "I'm coming up next weekend. Don't do anything until then." I promised her I wouldn't. I lied. That night I drove into town and bought 2 no trespassing signs, 6 trail cameras, and a bag of roofing nails. The kid at the hardware store tried to sell me pepper spray. I told him I wasn't planning on getting that close. The next morning, I hammered the signs into posts, placed the cameras, and, after a long debate with my conscience, laid a stretch of tire spikes just past the second bend of the trail. Not homemade. These were reclaimed from a junked cattle guard. I spray painted them orange and hung reflective tape nearby. It was legal. Technically, I'd even put up a sign. "Private pathway, vehicles will be stopped." The waiting began. Days passed. I kept walking the trail each morning, Toby by my side. No tracks, no SUVs, no letters. Miriam started thinking maybe we'd scared them off. I hoped so too, but that feeling in my gut said otherwise. One afternoon, just before sundown, I saw dust rise at the far edge of the woods. Engine noise followed. My pulse quickened. I stepped behind the trunk of a pine, camera in hand. And there he was, Justin North in his black SUV, moving slow but steady, window down like he owned the place. He didn't even stop when he saw the signs. He hit the spikes before he saw them. Tires hissed and folded like wet paper. His SUV rolled a few more feet, then shuddered to a halt. The driver's door flew open, and Justin came out cursing and stomping. I stepped out and waved. "Evening." "You lost again?" He stared at me like I'd slapped him. You can't do this," he shouted. "This is obstruction. It's criminal." "No," I said calmly, pointing to the camera above him. "This is documented. You're on private land, Mr. North. You ignored posted warnings. I suggest you call a tow. He kicked the dirt, muttered something into his phone, then slammed the door shut and sat steaming in his crippled SUV. Back at the house, Miriam was waiting on the porch. So, he found the spikes. She didn't smile. She just nodded. Good. The next morning, a letter arrived. But it wasn't from the Homeowner Association. It was from a company called Atlas Terrain Consultants, signed by a man named M. Zhang. It said they were contracted to verify environmental compliance along the shared corridor between Willow Creek Estates and adjacent undeveloped zones. Legal words for, "We're coming back. We're coming for your trail." And that's when I realized this wasn't about maps or even land. This was about ownership, and someone, somewhere, had decided that I didn't deserve mine. The name on the letter, M. Zhang, stuck with me. Not because it was unusual, but because it wasn't. I'd heard it before, in whispers at town hall meetings and late-night grumblings at Joe's Cafe. Martin Zhang, Deputy Administrator of Municipal Zoning. The kind of man who wore a suit to a barbecue and looked you in the eye while signing away your pasture. Miriam and I sat at the kitchen table reading the letter again and again. This isn't Homeowner Association nonsense anymore, she said, her voice low and tight. This is bigger. She was right. The tone had changed. No more inspections. No more neighborly excuses. Now it was compliance, access, and corridor realignment. Cold clinical phrases that meant someone was digging in with a bulldozer and a mandate. I called Lauren again. This time I didn't ask. I begged. I need you up here, now. They're not playing games anymore. She didn't hesitate. I'm leaving tonight. I'll be there by morning. When she arrived, she looked like a soldier stepping into a battlefield she didn't know she'd been born for. Still in her business suit, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back tight. She hugged me hard and said, "Let's burn them down. Legally." We spent the day going through every document we had. Old deeds, surveys, plats, photos, notarized maps. Miriam dug through the attic and came down with a tin box full of correspondence between my grandfather and the State Forestry Department. Turns out, our trail had been classified as private recreational corridor decades ago. Not just informal use, documented and recognized. Lauren's eyes lit up. That's gold. But just as quickly, her face darkened. She pulled out her laptop, connected to the county zoning site, and typed in the parcel number. What is it?" I asked. She turned the screen to me. A proposal. Not finalized, but in process. Rezoning for mixed-use development with greenway connectivity. The trail was marked in red. A future sidewalk. A bike path. A feature. Acha, they're trying to absorb it into public use, she said. But they're doing it in the worst way. Quietly. Under the radar. That night, we called a few folks. People who used to hunt or hike the trail back in the day. Some were gone. Others had moved. But one name rang a bell. Eddie Carlisle. Former surveyor. Now half retired. Living in a trailer by the reservoir. We drove out to him the next morning. Eddie was in a lawn chair with a fishing rod, toothpick in his mouth, and a cooler of beer at his feet. He squinted when he saw me. "Bishop, "I thought you died." "Not yet," I said. "But they're trying." We explained everything. Eddie scratched his beard, leaned back, and finally nodded. "I got some old logs from back when we first marked your lines. Maybe even a field report. Ain't digital, but the ink's still dry." We took the documents, thanked him, and drove home. Wind in our faces and hope rising just a little. Then, that night, something happened that made the trail seem like a footnote. Toby didn't come back. He always did. Every night. We'd let him out after dinner, and he'd do his rounds like clockwork. But this time, nothing. We searched until midnight. Flashlights. Calling. Whistling. I walked the whole trail twice. Nothing but silence and shadows. The next morning, we found him just past the second bend, lying beside the flattened tire spikes, his leash tangled in the brush. He was alive, barely, whimpering. Someone had hit him and left him there. Miriam fell to her knees. I stood there, frozen. Then rage poured through me like wildfire. This wasn't about land anymore. This wasn't about property lines or legal language. This was war, and I was done being polite. We spent that morning in the vet clinic, watching the clock crawl across the wall like it was taunting us. Toby was sedated, hooked to fluids, his breathing shallow. The vet, a kind man named Dr. Elridge, didn't sugarcoat it. He took a hard hit. Internal bruising, some cracked ribs. If he hadn't been found when he was, he'd have gone into shock. Miriam sat beside him the whole time, her hand on his paw. I stayed standing, arms crossed, heart heavy. The trail didn't matter in that moment. Maps didn't matter. Only the sound of his labored breathing and the certainty that someone had crossed a line no decent human being ever should. By the time we got home, something inside me had hardened. I'm not a violent man, never have been. But I've worn a badge, been in courtrooms, seen what unchecked power can do, and what it takes to stop it. Lauren stayed another night. We gathered everything: deeds, photos, Eddie's field notes, even Toby's vet report. Miriam scanned each page like a librarian preparing for a trial. It was late when she found it, a signature, Martin Zhang's name, co-signed with the head of Atlas Terrain Consultants, on a zoning proposal from 3 months ago. A trail expansion marked over private lands, including ours, with a footnote. Minimal resistance expected. Minimal resistance. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my gut. They weren't just trying to take our trail. They'd planned to do it quietly, banking on us rolling over. They didn't count on us digging in. Lauren made calls the next morning. One to the County Land Records Office, one to the local environmental group, and one to a journalist she knew back in law school. A pit bull in heels named Joni Rivera. Joni agreed to come out and take a look. She said, "Just make sure the coffee's strong and tell your dad I don't scare easy." While Miriam met with Joni on the porch, I walked the trail again. Alone this time. I checked every post, every camera. One had been knocked out of its casing. Another was gone entirely. Back at the house, I pulled the memory card from the last camera and loaded it into Lauren's laptop. We watched the footage together. There it was. Night vision, grainy but clear. A figure approaching the camera. Flashlight flicking back and forth. A man in a windbreaker. Tall, lean. Face half lit. Not Justin. Someone older. Then another figure came into view. Shorter, heavier, blonde hair. Karen. I didn't know her real name then. I would later. But even from the back, the way she gestured, choppy, commanding, told me everything. She pointed toward the trail, and the man nodded. Then he smashed the camera with a rock. That's criminal trespass, Lauren muttered, and destruction of property. I nodded. And motive. Joni took one look at the footage and grinned. You give me 10 more seconds of that, and I'll give you the front page. That night, she posted the first article. Retired cartographer faces off against HOA over historic trail. It went modestly viral. Comments poured in, some supportive, others calling me a paranoid old man. I didn't care. The war had left the woods and entered the world. The next day, Lauren found a message taped to her car windshield. Back off, lawyer girl. This isn't your fight. She showed it to me without saying a word. I folded it, put it in the drawer next to Toby's leash, and locked it. 2 days later, the county zoning board announced an emergency meeting to review the proposed rezoning of our area. I planned to be there, but so did someone else, and they didn't plan on speaking. The county zoning board meeting was held on a Thursday, inside the dusty old community center, down by the fire station. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like nervous insects, and the folding chairs were already half filled when I arrived. Miriam stood beside me in a denim jacket and calm fire in her eyes. Lauren came in from the side, clutching a thick folder like a weapon. Even Joni showed up with a recorder and a smirk that could slice steel. The room was warm with tension. People from Willow Creek Estates had come too. I spotted Justin North in the back, arms crossed, jaw tight, and there she was, Karen. Not even trying to blend in. Red blazer, clipboard, expression like she ran the place. She probably thought she did. The board opened with the usual formality. Then came public comment. I stood up slow, walked to the podium, and unfolded a map, older than most folks in the room. I laid it flat, smoothing the creases with my hand. This, I said, voice steady, is a record of the land my family's protected since 1958, long before Willow Creek had sidewalks, before it had walls, before it had rules. I showed them the footage of trespassing, the letter from Atlas Terrain, the co-signed zoning proposal. I passed around the field notes from Eddie Carlisle. Every page was a nail in their coffin. Then I paused, took a breath, and said, my trail isn't just dirt. It's where I taught my daughter to follow the stars, where my grandson took his first step in the wild. It's not for sale, not for trade, and it sure as hell isn't public property just because someone drew a red line on a screen. Some clapped. Some didn't. Karen didn't even blink. Then she stood up. I represent a community of families, she said sweetly, who believe in access, nature, and shared values. This man is blocking progress. A bike path would serve dozens of residents. He wants to keep it for himself. Ask yourselves, who's being selfish? She looked at me like a mother scolding a child. But I didn't flinch. Then someone else stood up. Eddie Carlisle. He hadn't told us he'd come. His voice cracked, but it was strong. I helped mark that trail. Back when we used compasses, not drones. It belongs to Bishop. Period. The room shifted. More neighbors stood. One after another. People I hadn't seen in years. Some I didn't know. A woman from the Historical Society. A young man who'd once fished with my grandson. Even the mail carrier who used to drop off our Christmas cards. But the real surprise came when Judge Grayson walked in late. Silver hair. Long stride. No nonsense presence. He wasn't here officially. But when he asked to speak, nobody dared say no. I don't know what's worse, he said. The arrogance of thinking you can take what's not yours, or the cowardice of doing it with paperwork instead of principle. I've known Harold Bishop my whole life. You'd be wise not to bet against him. The board recessed for deliberation. The room buzzed. Justin paced in the back, whispering into his phone. Karen sat like stone. Lips pressed so tight they turned white. We waited, and then the board returned. Motion to suspend the rezoning proposal indefinitely. The chairwoman announced, pending independent environmental and historical review. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a line drawn in the dirt. A stop sign. As we left, Lauren squeezed my arm. We bought time. Now we build our case. But that night, back at the house, we found the porch light smashed. The camera by the gate torn down and nailed to the front door. A single sheet of paper. It read, "You should have sold when you had the chance." I folded it, added it to the drawer. Then I unlocked the safe, because if they wanted to escalate, I knew how to meet them. And I wasn't done protecting what was mine. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in the old armchair in the living room. Shotgun leaned against the side. The safe cracked open by my feet. Miriam stayed upstairs with Toby, still resting but recovering. Lauren had already driven back to Boise, swearing to file injunctions and get the press digging deeper. I watched the trees through the window, waiting for lights, waiting for footsteps. None came. Not that night. By morning, I was tired, but sharper than I'd felt in weeks. Fear has a way of clearing the mind when it stops clouding it. I spent the day hardening the perimeter. Motion lights, fresh batteries in the trail cams, added a chain to the back gate. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was necessary. Then around midday, a knock on the door. Unexpected. I opened it slowly. Shotgun hidden behind the frame. Harold Bishop?" the man asked. He was in his 50s, sunburned, brown vest with patches from forestry services. He held up a badge. Real this time. Name's Dave Kincaid. State Environmental Compliance. Mind if we talk? I let him in. Watched him scan the walls like a man looking for lies. We got a request for an emergency environmental review on a disputed corridor, he said. Your daughter sent us records, plus a formal complaint against Atlas Terrain Consultants for unauthorized survey activity. He sat down and pulled out a thick folder. I'm here unofficially, he added. You didn't hear that. But there's something about this case that doesn't smell right. I nodded slowly. You're not the first to say that. We spent the next hour walking the trail together. He took photos, asked smart questions, and muttered a lot to himself. When we reached the second bend, the spot with the tire spikes, he stopped and knelt. You marked these? Painted and flagged, I said. Before any incident occurred, he nodded. You'll be fine on liability. When we got back to the house, he asked if I knew a man named Martin Zhang personally. Only by the mess he's making. Dave frowned. Zhang's name's been popping up in other cases. pushed rezoning on protected wetlands, paved over historical logging trails without permission. Looks like he's got friends in development. I leaned forward. And now he's trying to bury my land under a sidewalk. He closed the folder. Keep everything documented. I'll file what I can, but be ready. If they feel this slipping, they'll get desperate. He left without shaking hands. Professional man. I respected that. That evening, Joni Rivera sent me an email. 3 photos. One was of Karen leaving a restaurant downtown with Martin Zhang. Another of Justin North handing off an envelope to a man outside a law office. The last was blurry but unmistakable. Martin Zhang entering a county records office after hours using a side door. She added, 1 line. Whatever this is, it runs deeper than a trail. The next day, a drone buzzed over our backyard. It hovered for a while, then zipped off. Miriam called Lauren. Lauren called the sheriff. The sheriff said, if it's not armed, it's not illegal. And that's when I decided to visit an old friend. Dan Foley used to be a deputy. Retired 10 years ago. Now runs a gun shop and range near the ridge. We met over black coffee and a shared understanding of how the world used to work and how it doesn't anymore. He gave me a wireless jammer. Illegal to use. Not illegal to own. You do the math. The next time the drone came, it dropped like a stone right into my tomato patch. I buried it in a shoebox under the shed. No note this time. No message. Just silence. But I could feel it, like the air before a storm. And I knew we were close. Too close for them to stay quiet much longer. The silence didn't last. 3 days after the drone incident, a white pickup truck with no plates rolled up my drive and stopped just shy of the gate. No one got out. I watched from the porch, the old 12-gauge resting across my knees. They sat there maybe 5 minutes. Engine idling. Windows. Dark. Then they backed up slow and disappeared down the road. Message received. I called Dan Foley. He said, they're watching to see how much fight you've got left. I told him, they haven't seen half of it yet. The next morning, I got a call from Joni. She sounded breathless. Zhang's being investigated. Ethics Board just opened an inquiry. Word is, somebody leaked the photos. My editor's running a full Sunday spread. By that evening, it was online. County official linked to private developers in land grab scandal. Joni didn't name me directly, but the details were close enough. My phone didn't stop buzzing for hours. Messages from old friends, from strangers. Even a state representative's office reached out. I was still reading through them when Lauren called. Dad, she said, brace yourself. The Homeowner Association had just filed a civil suit against me. Trespass, obstruction, property damage. They even had the nerve to include Toby's name in the complaint as evidence of hostile intent. Lauren was furious. This is intimidation, plain and simple. They want to drown you in paperwork, tie up your money, keep you too busy to fight. I told her I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. We spent the next day at the county courthouse, filing our own motion, an emergency injunction to block the rezoning entirely, citing evidence of corruption, unlawful surveillance, and criminal trespass. Miriam walked in holding a binder 2 inches thick. Lauren wore her sharpest heels. I wore my father's watch, and the same blazer I wore to his funeral. The judge looked tired, but he listened. He read every page. He asked questions. He took his time. And then he said, I'm granting the injunction. Temporarily. Final hearing in 2 weeks. Until then, nothing moves. It wasn't the end. But it gave us something we hadn't had since this started. Breathing room. That weekend, neighbors we hadn't spoken to in years came by with pies, handshakes, and stories about their own quiet battles with the Homeowner Association. Turns out, we weren't the only ones they'd tried to silence. Karen didn't show her face. Justin North disappeared. And Martin Zhang, word was he'd been placed on leave pending investigation. But I knew better than to celebrate. This kind of machine doesn't stop just because the wheels squeak. It shifts gears. It finds new drivers. Sure enough, Tuesday morning brought a new envelope. Certified mail. No return address. Inside was a contract. Offer to buy the property. Cash. High 6 figures. It came with a letter. Sell now, walk away clean, or lose everything. I read it 3 times. Then I walked it out back, lit a match, and watched it burn in the rusted barbecue pit beside the shed. They still didn't understand. This land wasn't an investment. It was my memory, my inheritance, my fight. And if they wanted to come and take it, they better bring more than money. They better bring a damn army. The final hearing landed on a rainy Monday morning. The kind of gray, dragging weather that makes people tired and quiet. But I felt sharp, focused, like the storm outside had pulled all the fuzz out of the air. I put on my old military coat, the one with a tear in the lining and a brass button that didn't match. Miriam packed a thermos of coffee and a folder so full it barely shut. Lauren met us on the courthouse steps. Inside, it was standing room only. Reporters lined the back wall. Neighbors filled the benches. Even Judge Grayson was there, not on the bench, just watching. The room went quiet when the case was called. The attorney for the Homeowner Association was slick, young, cocky, spoke with the kind of certainty you only get when you've never had to rebuild anything with your own hands. He painted me as a dangerous loner, a stubborn old man holding up progress. He called my land a relic, my actions extremist. Then Lauren stood, and I swear, I'd never been prouder of anything in my life. She was calm, methodical. She laid out every document, every photo. She walked the court through each step like a schoolteacher with a chalkboard. She showed how the rezoning was riddled with errors, how Zhang had bypassed legal process, how Atlas Terrain had operated without permits, how Justin North had falsely presented himself as a government inspector. Then she played the security footage. Karen, pointing down my trail. The man beside her smashing our camera. Murmurs rolled through the courtroom. Joni Rivera's voice recorder clicked on. Then the vet's statement. Eddie Carlisle's affidavit. Dave Kincaid's field report. And finally, Miriam's quiet voice, reading from the letter that offered us money to disappear. This land is not for sale, she said. It holds the footsteps of our family, and footprints don't come with price tags. The judge asked if I wanted to speak. I stood, hands resting on the back of the chair in front of me. I've seen a lot in my years, I said. Watched land turn into parking lots. Watched neighbors turn into strangers. But I never thought I'd see the day when standing your ground made you the villain. I paused, looked at Karen, at the empty chair where Zhang should have been. You came for my trail because it looked easy. Because I looked tired. Because you thought I'd roll over. Well, I didn't, and I won't. Not for a sidewalk, not for a condo, not for the whole damn city. The judge leaned back. Silence held the room for a long beat. Then she spoke. The court finds in favor of the defendant. The rezoning proposal is nullified. The Homeowner Association is ordered to cease all activity relating to the Bishop property. Furthermore, evidence of misrepresentation and harassment will be referred to the District Attorney's Office for criminal review. Applause broke out. The gavel hit the bench twice. Order, but I felt it. Relief. Heavy, grateful, bone deep. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke just enough for the sun to spill through like forgiveness. Lauren cried a little. Miriam hugged her long. I just stood there and breathed. Over the next weeks, everything began to settle. Charges were filed. Zhang resigned. Karen was removed from her position. Justin vanished from public view. Our land remained untouched. Toby recovered. Slow but steady. One morning, he limped beside me up the trail again. We didn't speak, just walked. And when we reached the second bend, I stopped. The spikes were gone. The cameras taken down, just dirt and pine needles now. Peaceful. I pulled a small wood sign from my pack. Hand-carved, varnished. I drove it into the ground. Private trail. Bishop family. 1958 forever. I stepped back, nodded once, and we went on walking.